Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Feel Good Hour with myself, Muhammad Fasik Peterson. And of course, it's a Friday afternoon, heading into the evening. Hope wherever you are having a relaxing and, should I say, a contented Friday evening as we put the work week behind us. Well, tonight I'd like to continue the conversation we had the last couple of weeks, and that, of course, is dealing with film and how film has influenced our lives and our perceptions, and particularly looking at the relationships this evening. We wanted to continue looking at relationships and how our relationships are shaped and our perceptions are shaped by film and television and what we see on screen. Joining me this evening is Tashneem, who is someone who appreciates film, I think, as much as I do. And it's kind of like just not necessarily a scholarly or academic discussion, but more from our perspectives as people who grew up with technology, grew up with media, grew up with television and film and all of the other mediums up until where we are now with social media. And we want to just explore this. And you're welcome to get in on the discussion. You can WhatsApp us on 0829 913 913 or SMS us on 47913. Let me greet my guest this evening, Tashneem. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam, Muhammad Fasih. Shukran for having me back again.
It's a pleasure, Tashneem, and I think it's again an important discussion to have because we really, as a community or as a society, assess the impact that media has had on us, whether it be social media, whether it be television, film, even newspapers. We really assess what all these popular forms of media have, how they have influenced us. So tonight we're speaking about, as we mentioned, relationships and how our perceptions of relationships and particularly marriage is shaped by the things we see on television. And what I'm talking about is, um, when people start to look for spouses and they start to look for the type of life that they want to have, it's always along the lines of, oh, I've watched, Notting Hill, or I've watched this type of film or that type of film. I've seen this actor or actress. I know Notting Hill's a very dated reference, but nonetheless, I've seen all of these types of films, and I want that type of spouse that's going to pick me up, pick me and sweep me off my feet. And then what happens is, after much turmoil in the film, the couple finally gets married, and then when they get married, happily ever after, and that's the end of the film, and things just end there. But we don't get to see what happens after that, the challenges, raising children together or not sometimes. The challenges of living together, living with someone else. Would you say that sometimes people tend to look at film not with a critical eye, or most of the times they don't look at film with a critical eye, and therefore they absorb these things passively, and it can actually negatively affect your perspective and perception of what a real relationship is.
Definitely. That's what I think. Um, I think we watch certain things and we have an understanding because this is our first viewing of how things are supposed to work. But is it supposed to work that way? Is it just something we're watching and we thinking is the ideal way of living or finding someone? And sorry, you were speaking just a film, but I have to add that it's books as well, eh?
Yes,
Books.
no, definitely. I mean, if we talk about those little books, those silhouette still exists, and all these other types of romance novels. Um, People would read and daydream about the type of man that's reflected in this book, the kind of
Or woman.
or or women also. I don't know how many men read silhouette books, but they would look at the type of person that they would want to get married to, and basically that would be the type of person. And you ask yourself, is it realistic? Because the story is basically shaped to appeal to the reader and make the experience exciting. But how often
Mm-hmm.
does that translate into reality? How often does those characteristics, the characteristics of the person in the book or in the film or on TV in the series, how often does that translate to real life? And we're not talking about, sparkly vampires and that type of relationship. That's really,
Mm-hmm.
completely out of the ballpark. But we're talking about when people start looking at the qualities of a person on television, expecting that they should find someone with the same
Yes.
mentality and mindset.
Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to watching film, I think we have this limited understanding of how reality actually works. Because when we watch film, we see characters, and usually these characters are one dimensional. You know, these characters have one defining character basically. Um, yeah, they have one defining character. The jock. Uh, you have the weirdo. All these defining characters. But yeah, so when we see people, we do the same thing. We define people by one characteristic and we think this might be the ideal person. But we forget that when we watch a movie is only an hour long. That's it. So, how much can you get to know about someone in 1 hour, especially you as the viewer? And once that happily ever after happens, and the credits roll and they are finally married, what actually happens after that? They never show us, the reality of everything. So you get married, then what?
I like that you said that because we spoke about basically stereotypes, because films rely heavily on stereotypes to make the viewer used to,
Hmm.
and kind of acclimatize them to the story. That's the evil stepmother. That's this film relies heavily on stereotypes, and
Tropes.
similarly,
Yeah,
tropes. Yes.
certain tropes, yes.
So similarly, those kinds of stereotypical roles that a film, lays out, would also translate to the dashing, brave man that will sweep this lady off her feet, or this, you know, uh, completely defenseless female, who's so caught up
I
in
bet you
in
that's what it literally says in the script.
I imagine so. I imagine so. And it's it people want to be the heroine or the hero in the film or the book or the TV show. They want to have someone look at them like that and embrace them like that. And I feel that you know people's emotions are being exploited so badly that when they get to a point where they actually meet someone that they feel that they could have a relationship with, they've already been messed up so much by uh, all of these tropes and stereotypes that they implant
Hmm.
or they transplant those expectations onto a real human being. Because remember, Alfredo, Mancini, whatever his name might be on the screen, is a character. When he takes off the costume and he gets into his regular clothes, he goes to his regular life.
Is he still Italian?
Let's
Because he
say for the
sounds
sake,
Italian.
let's say for the sake of argument, he is right. Uh, I don't know why that's relevant, but anyway. So, so basically, he's a character. He's playing a role. It's not real, but you lived in that moment and you experienced it as real. So therefore, that person then takes away from that I want that type of person. So when they meet someone, they transplant those expectations onto that person
And
uh,
feelings.
and feelings and are ultimately disappointed when
Hmm.
they realize they're dealing with a real person.
I'm sorry. The reason why I'm saying feelings is because you just said earlier they feel, and my understanding of form. We were literally just speaking about this earlier about how art is what makes you feel, and that's what form does. Form makes you feel. So, are you to trust your feelings when you place this idealistic stereotype onto someone? Or do you actually wait and find out about the true characteristics? And this is the question we should be asking ourselves, especially when we take movies and we take, media and we try to apply it into reality, especially when trying to find a partner. sees the people who are super single.
The one thing that I also find quite sad is that there are many people who will cycle through potential partners, potential
Mm-hmm.
spouses, and they'll be looking for these fictitious, they'll be looking for this fictitious person amongst these people. They'll be looking for those qualities that doesn't necessarily exist in an ordinary person, you know. Uh, and sometimes they'll be robbing themselves of a real experience, a real marriage, a real life, because they've tied themselves into the fantasy and they've given
This
themselves
idea of
over to the
someone
fantasy.
else. Mm.
Yes. Would you say that um, part of this, part of what makes this so sad is that by virtue of taking from film and television these tropes to be real, what we've actually done is we've we've assimilated into the virtual reality and moved away from reality. And even while we are walking around, we are still embedded in the virtual reality. And I know I'm starting to sound like, it's this is
Wow,
something
we
that
in the
comes from the
metaverse.
Matrix, from the Matrix. This is something something that Morpheus might say. But don't you feel that that's kind of where we've planted our brain in the virtual, even though we're living in the physical?
In reality,
Yes, in the
it could
reality.
be. I mean, everybody wants a happily ever after, but I think this is the mistake a lot of us make. We think that life is this destination that I have to end up at, but we don't know, or we're not told that life is actually a journey and everything is continuous. You're always learning, you're always experiencing, you're never going to have all the answers, you're never going to know for sure. And I think this is the biggest lie film and media tells us. The fact that we have to end up at a certain place at a certain time. Not that it's something that we have to learn from. If we mess up here, we can still continue. We just learn from that. We move on. No, it's a journey, like I just said. And that's the lie. It's again form and media tells us, and yet we love it so much. We love that lie, eh?
I'm glad that you said that that it's a journey and not a destination. Because that's what makes it so devastating when people get divorced. Because I'm not supposed to get divorced. I'm supposed to have this perfect life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes it so devastating. I'm not supposed to be single at 22. I was supposed to get married at 20. Uh, and I'm not supposed to still be a junior, salesperson in the company. I should have been an executive by now. 5 years later. And
Hmm.
people are they look at their lives and they say, well, this is where I should have been. And what we don't realize is that life experience is about the turmoil and the ups and the downs.
Mm-hmm.
That is what makes life. you know
Sometimes I also think that we don't have any self compassion. You know, we don't yeah, we don't have any compassion for ourselves. So when we go through certain things or certain experiences, we feel so lonely that we're the only ones going through it. We don't know that, what connects us with other people is the fact that, others have been through the same thing. Not on TV, in reality.
I'm speaking to Tashneem Abrams, and this is the Feel Good Hour. We're talking about film and how it impacts on our relationships and potentially, the people that we want to get married to. Is it destructive? Let us know your thoughts on 0829 913 913. You can also SMS us on 47913. When we come back after this break, inshallah, we will continue. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program of the Feel Good Hour. And tonight we're speaking about relationships with Tashneem Abrams and particularly looking at uh, film and television and all kinds of other media, basically, and how they've, in a sense, informed our choices in spouse, and also the way that we perceive marriage and life to go thereafter. Um, Now, Tashneem, one of the things that I want to maybe just revisit, and this is something that for me is quite surprising, is that when we voluntarily watch a film and it says romance on there, so it's a certain type of film, right? We don't watch action films with the same type of, perception that I'm going to leave my house and then, I'm going to jump in a car with two cops and we're going to race down the road after, the bad guys. And then Transformers are going to jump onto the,
That sounds like
get
fun.
the screen. I know that it sounds like fun, but I mean, like Transformers are going to, jump out of the woodworks. We don't perceive that because that for us is not reality. But somehow, the kind of romance that films portray, the unrealistic type of relationships that people have in these films, seems to be very much uh, believed and believable for
That's
people.
a really good point you're making. Why do you think that is? I think
Yes.
it's because of the whole evoking, yet again, evoking of emotions. That's what I think it is. I mean, that's the one thing we have control of. We don't have control of, Transformers being outside. We don't have control of finding action anywhere or somewhere, but romance, finding a partner or finding someone or just, uh, having a romantic relationship is something that we can control. We can go outside right now, find someone, feel whatever we're supposed to feel, go through the honeymoon phase, and call it quits, and then start all over again. But yeah, that's why I think that might be one of the reasons. The thrill of those emotions and going through them and feeling something or anything. I think that's the dangers also because where do we commit then in the future?
And I think some people, that when they start doing what one term inner work and start looking at the choices that
Hmm.
they've made in life and correcting that, they get to a point where they say, you know what, I need to start making more realistic choices in my life. But then you get
Mm-hmm.
other people who refuse to leave the matrix. So they refuse to leave the fantasy, right? um and I think that's so sad because they're still hanging on for this image of what life could and should be, and so they're not taking advantage of what is there, what is available. um and we find also sometimes that people, in essence, they choose the person that's entirely wrong for them.
I
On
think,
the
yeah, sorry,
Sometimes
I'm
that's,
listening.
yeah, they choose the person that's entirely wrong for them on the basis of, well, it worked for this couple and it worked out, right? So
Oh, he'll change.
yes,
He's not
you'll
giving me any
change.
attention, no affection, but he'll
the
change.
the
No
the, con-
effort, he'll
the,
change.
the concept of
Yeah.
the bad boy or the bad girl, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
and then you realize that he's not a bad boy, he's a bad man. You understand what I'm
Who
saying?
is just unhealthy to be in a relationship with.
Yes, when I say bad man, I'm not necessarily saying that he's
Hmm.
evil, but he's a man. He's not a boy.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that's the first thing. The second thing is that he makes the choices because he's an adult, and if his parents, if society haven't been able to save him, what makes you think you're going to save and change him? And the sad part is some people get caught in the cycle where they get into a relationship with someone who ultimately is not good for the emotional, psychological health. Um, but it's because they think they can save him as how that person was saved on that
Yes,
TV show.
but for that specifically, I feel or I think that it's not one specific thing like form that's making the person believe they can change whoever. I think that has a lot to do with culture, with psychology. So yeah, I think with when it comes to matters of the heart, I don't think form
It
and
is more
media
complex.
is yes, yeah, is solely responsible for the way we see things or the way we think things should be. But it's exactly what you said, Harfasich, about emotional maturity, self awareness, EQ, what else? It's all these things where we can actually take responsibility, sit with ourselves, find out what we need, what we want, what we can learn from what we just went through when we do experience certain things. I think this is also very important because just blaming film and media, although it plays a huge role in programming us, definitely without a doubt, I think it would be irresponsible just to blame that solely. Yeah, I think these, like you said, it's it's complex. You know.
No, no, definitely there are other facets to it, but you see, when I look at this, for instance, um, the most exciting soap operas are the ones where the bad boy gets tamed, so to speak, right? Where he changes his ways and his bad habits. That's like the pinnacle, the peak
Mhm.
of the story, right? And people buy into this stuff. They buy into it wholeheartedly. It's like, oh my word, this is so romantic, right? They've gone through this stuff. That's why soapies can go on forever. You know, uh, not
Film
forever
as well.
necessarily. Film, but particularly soapies. I think soapies are the
Mhm.
perfect example of this. I mean, especially the 90s was the age for soapies, where the relationship of two people could be stretched out over 10 years and the turmoil. And I'm not going to mention names of soap operas now,
I would have
but
liked to know the names.
no, I'm not going to mention those names. But anyway, so people would be following the ups and downs and literally sitting at the television every evening at 6 to 7, watching this thing play out, right? And dreaming about having the same type of relationship, right? And seeing people behaving badly sometimes and then changing for love, and then behaving badly sometimes and then changing for love again. So would you say that it's this kind of, for lack of a better word, programming that's
Mhm.
ultimately again informed our choices? And I'm not saying that there are not other factors, but it is a seriously
One of the
contributing
factors,
factor.
yes, it is one of the factors, like I said, but I think
Mm,
there's many others out that also play a role. But form, definitely,
mm.
without a doubt, form and like you said, soapies. You can change someone. You can stay in this unhealthy relationship because this person will definitely change. You can stay in this I don't want to say abusive relationship because I know, yeah, I don't want to say that. You should remove that. I don't want to say abusive relationship.
Well, the other thing also that I find quite interesting about film is that the idea of uh, the happily ever after. And I jumped to this because I think to a certain degree, when people meet someone, that's already playing in the back of their mind somehow. You meet someone and you see someone for the first time and you're thinking, will they make a good partner? What type of marriage will we have? What type of life? Because you're looking at the person thinking what type of kids you'll have, basically. They're gonna have your eyes or your hair or your this or your that. It's natural for people to make that kind of a connection when they're looking at someone and they're considering them to be a partner. Um, but within that, don't you think that we also create this idea in our minds that the the idea of the happily ever after is that as long as I found the person that I want, there's no work that has to happen after
Oh
this.
gosh, yes,
There's
yeah,
no
deep.
effort that needs to
Ah,
happen after this. I can literally just find the right person. We'll click. It's like when you
click.
connect,
Yes.
when the Bluetooth connects, and
Yes.
once the Bluetooth
Yes.
connects, everything is just going to be fine. And don't you think that's kind of like the biggest lie that film has sold us, and what might be the most destructive message that it's sending, not specifically to
Infatuation.
not specifically to 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds,
Mm.
and 20-year-olds, but to 12, 13, 14, and 15-year-olds.
You get some adults too who believe that.
Oh, yes.
But yes, I do think so. I think films specifically um they make you believe this idea or give you this idea of what things are supposed to be like. Like you just said now, you were mentioning those things, infatuation, butterflies, instant chemistry, soulmates, kismet. I don't know what other terms there are. All these tropes within film as well. These all these tropes that make you believe that when you find someone, it will just feel right. Feel right. Um, there's no work that you have to put in. There's no effort you have to put in. Everything will just sort itself out. The towels will be magically picked up from the floor. What
What
else?
is it with towels? This is
I
not a.
don't know.
It's,
Someone asked me once. This is not going in, right?
go ahead, ma'am. Just go ahead.
But
I want to
someone
know what
asked
this
me
is
that
about.
literally, what would you do if I threw towels on the floor? And I was so shocked by this. I was like, what? What? It was such a weird question. Like, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't you just pick your towels up? I don't understand. Like, if you know the towels are there. What? But yeah, you don't have to put that in. Not the
Not a
towels. You
problem.
can ask that question again. Sorry, Muhammad Fasi.
Okay, then that's fine. That's fine. Uh, okay, so basically, we come back to. Sorry, just give me a minute.
Why are you
Okay.
laughing?
I don't know. It's just this towels and it's just weird. All right. So anyway, coming back to what we are saying, and again, the most destructive thing I think is when we're selling these concepts to adults, yes, but also to children, um, and especially in environments. Don't you think also this contributes? Not necessarily the main factor, but it contributes in an environment where young girls and young boys grow up in a household where there's not a healthy marital relationship or any relationship
Mhm.
at all, and then they see these things, they see uh these scenarios play out, and they think that's what reality is and that's what life will be like, so they absorb this and they think that's what a perfect marriage should be. So they really don't have a reference for what it might be from a practical point of view. They
Mhm.
adopt something completely fake, and then they end up in a marriage, in that relationship, without any tools and expecting it just should have worked. Why doesn't it work? You know,
You just
or the
highlighted something very important, though. You said without the tools. And I think
yes,
that's extremely important. Like, when we go into marriage, then we think we know everything and we know absolutely nothing. So why aren't we actually given the tools or the knowledge before, to make us understand this is actually something you're gonna have to put effort in, this is something you're gonna have to deal with, or someone you're gonna have to deal with every day. This is how you're supposed to communicate with them, this is you're supposed to have respect, and if you have conflict and if you have an argument, there can still be respect within those arguments and within that conflict. But we aren't taught these things. You just, I think, taking a swing at everything. If you don't succeed the first time, you can always yeah, succeed the next or the next. I guess I don't know. I'm just kidding.
I'm talking to Tashneem Abrams, and we're speaking about film and how it's kind of colored our thinking around relationships and marriage, particularly in the choices that we make as adults sometimes. When we come back after the break, inshallah, we will continue. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program, the Feel Good Hour, in conversation this evening with Tashneem Abrams, and we're talking about film and how it's impacted in our lives and the way that we perceive relationships and marriage. Now, Tashneem, the other thing is, of course, um, and this has just got to do with the basic day to day things. Let's not talk about the type of person you're marrying and clashes of personality and compromising. Let's just talk about the reality, right? So, happily ever after doesn't speak about debt. It doesn't speak about trying to make ends meet. It doesn't speak about financial challenges and you
Conflict
know
resolution.
yes, conflict resolution and dealing with children and trying to make a marriage work under strained circumstances. Happily ever after does not encompass that. It's a broad definition of what a ideal life would be like, right? So when we look at that aspect that's missing, do you feel that film needs to become more real and needs to? And I'm sure there are films like that, but films need to become more real, because, with like it or not, we are educating people with the
We are
type of films that.
educating people, but you were asking, should forms become more real? But I don't think it's yet again reliant on the form, because will people watch movies? Will they watch things? Will the audience watch or absorb things that are too real? People watch film to escape. That's what they do.
The reason why I asked that question particularly is because, um, until we until we get real about situations, we have a scenario where people will continue to be misled, you know whether we like it or not. People are going to watch these things and be taken in by it. It's the same way, going back to soapies, where the villain in the story, right, will on an ordinary day walk out in the streets and be accosted by fans of the show, and people
Hmm.
will literally be saying, "How could you do this to so and so? You're such an evil person." Maybe pelting them with fruit or whatever the case may be, and completely, being nasty and obnoxious to these people, not realizing, because they've bought into the whole idea, not realizing that this is just film, it's just acting, it's just a character that they're putting on. That's not even the accent, or that's not even who they are. So
Hmm.
similarly, uh, you know, the same thing applies in a scenario where people get taken in by a message and by how it is like it or not, they get taken in by the beautifully constructed story. They get taken in by the sense of wonder, and the emotions are being manipulated throughout the show, the program. I mean, that's what entertainment is about. It's like, manipulating your sense of angst and awe and all of these things. So when I talk about, films becoming more real, yes, it's not economically viable, to have real shows. It doesn't fit in the fantasy and escapism that we have. But don't you think that by having more of these films, not maybe necessarily changing the industry, but having more of these films, it will serve as a teaching mechanism to show people that life is not always rosy. It's not always what you think it will be, on the basis of, what you've seen in romance land, basically.
Um, Earlier you were speaking about how sometimes people need to do, their own work. They need to self-reflect. They need to be self-aware, etc. So I think it again, even if we have films that are way more realistic and that show certain things in, you know, like true reality, basically, the question would be, are people going to watch it? I think people run away it again from people run away. They run away. This is why they watch film. They try to escape. So would they want to escape by watching something that's real? Because we do get movies out there that are quite realistic, that speak about divorce, that speak about marriage, that speak about the in between. Um, so it's not wholly bad. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's also reliant or dependent on the individual themselves and where they are in their lives, I guess.
I agree with you there, but I think because it's in my minority. I mean, if you look at, I'm sure Netflix or Showmax, if you look at Netflix or any other streaming service, the majority of the movies I imagine on those platforms speak exactly to the type of thing that we are speaking against this evening. Right, the majority of
Hmm?
those films, the minority might be those thought-provoking, real portrayals of life, in all aspects, and showing you what these types of interactions would really be like, as opposed to what the fantasy is. So, I think maybe there is a space or is a place for that type of cinema, um, and it perhaps it can serve as a counterbalance to what we currently have uh, and it should be perhaps used more as an educational tool rather
Mm-hmm.
than something that would make it to cinemas because it would never make bank. If we were truly honest, it would never make bank. I mean, no one wants to speak about the towel on the floor as a movie plot. You understand? It's got to do rather with the romance, the ups and downs, who wasn't faithful in
Why
a
would you want
relationship
to
and stuff
fall
like
in
that.
love with a real person if you can just fall in love with potential?
Exactly, exactly.
Why would you want a healthy relationship if you can just fall in love with that bad boy that you were speaking about or bad girl? No,
Well, and we've even coined the term "bad girl," "bad boy," and
a trope.
uh, again, it's a trope, it's a stereotype,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we've taken out of cinema. A person who is got just a little enough bad in them to make them exciting, but the reality of that is you marry someone like that and you realize, but that's who they are. You know, that is a person who doesn't like to be faithful. That's a person who doesn't like to respect your feelings. That is a person who does not like to engage with real concepts and themes because perhaps they enjoy following their own whims and fancies. um, and people get let down because they've made this choice and they hang on for dear life trying to change this person, whether male or female. Um, and that I think is so sad. It's where we as a society we are actually um, we're creating our problems, man. We're making ourselves sad. We're putting ourselves in this negative position by virtue of not being honest with ourselves about what's really going on. But would you
Trying
say
to be
also
in a fantasy.
we're trying to be in a fantasy? But would you say also that again, it's because the reason why we are so obsessed is because we've surrounded ourselves with these messages. We watch more cinema than ever before. Uh,
We
we watch
do.
we
We
watch
do.
more TV shows. We are obsessed with soapies. We're obsessed with these things, and so it's more opportunities for these things to influence our thoughts and our feelings and our
It
desires in a
does.
sense.
It does, definitely. But then I also have to ask, why is it that you and I are more realistic about this? When you get some other people as well, why are they more realistic about, what's out there, what they're supposed to find, or what you're supposed to look for, or, you know, looking
Maybe
at someone for who they really are.
maybe the
So
reason
I
why
grew up with TV, obsessively watching TV, obsessively watching film, but I still know the reality from fantasy. So what separates the two of us who grew up the same way, watching TV, absorbing all these things, but still having an understanding that it's not reality? That is also the question I would want to know. Like, why do some people see things the way they are, and why do some people see things, or want to live in that fantasy?
well, I think okay, and I'm not trying to make any kind of analysis on people's emotional state, but there is this thing that we are more vulnerable when we're trying to escape life. All right, it's easy to hide in the fantasy than in the real world and facing the problems and challenges
Or
and
yourself.
or yourself. Kind of the Matrix is more exciting. There's a scene in the Matrix.
What is it with you and the Matrix?
But the reason why I'm sharing this is because
Mm.
it speaks to this weird virtual relationship that we have with media. There's a scene in the Matrix where one of Morpheus's guys decides to betray Morpheus, and he's
Mm-hmm.
sitting having a steak, and he's sitting with one of the Sentinels, and he's going to give up their position, and allow the machines to attack. And he's like saying, I know the steak is not real, but it tastes good. you know
I remember that
I'm
scene.
I'm being manipulated, but but I know, and so therefore, I don't care. And he wants to be, plugged back into the matrix and come back as a wealthy guy and all of these things. So when I look at that, I say to myself, aren't we choosing our matrix in a sense? Because it's more comfortable and more satisfying to be in the fantasy world than to live with the reality.
That's quite sad. It's true, but it is quite sad if you think about it. Yeah, that is true. People prefer living in the Matrix. That's the sad
Yes.
reality of it all. Living for romanticism, or the idea of romanticism, instead of actually putting effort into relationships. And I don't speak about romantic relationships only. I think every relationship takes effort. It takes time. It takes
Mm.
consideration. And I think film teaches us yet again these lies about how things always just work out, and also how things are. Everything in movies is based on what is it? The word I'm looking for. I'm just thinking. It's like they have these answers to everything,
Mm.
and it should apply to everyone. But that's
Yes.
not how life works. It doesn't mean something works out for someone, especially in film, it's going to work out for you the exact way. Does that
Ca-
make sense?
well, I think it does make sense. One of the things that I've noticed in film is that yes, there are specific set of laws that are used to manipulate our emotions. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
when you watch a film and let's say it's a Disney film, you could automatically see the bad guy because he's the ugly one. He's the one with
Mm-hmm.
the bushy eyebrows. The one with the sharp face and features. He looks like a vulture, basically. Um, when we watch animated films. The same with in TV and film in some instances, and particularly in the early years, the
But
bad
again,
guy,
one-dimensional characters.
one-dimensional characters, and also
Yes.
it's and also what it did, it gave people the perception that bad people are only unattractive people in what society's standards
Mm-hmm.
seem to lean towards. So if someone is attractive, they cannot be bad, they cannot be evil, right? But if someone's unattractive or ugly, then in their perception, not necessarily ugly, because I don't think anyone's really ugly, but
Yeah,
unattractive
that
in some in a sense, then that person is the bad person. So it's easy to spot
but
bad people because they're ugly.
yet again, then we should take a step further, and then we should think about how they're making us believe that you get, you know, bad people and good people, and separating the two. And we're not seeing people as people who have bad and good qualities. Do you understand what I mean?
I I
You
I I
get,
agree. I agree with you. I think that yes, there are people who have good and bad qualities. Some have more bad qualities than good. Some have more
but
good
that,
qualities than bad. It's definitely different mixtures of it. But in terms of film itself, it's sort of very very
mm,
black and white. You
it is
know,
black and white. And that
that's
is
what.
also the thing. We forget that as human beings, we are all so complex, and, we are gray. Everything is a gray area except Islam. Obviously, it's black and white. But I mean, us as humans,
Hundred
we are
percent.
so complex and so gray. And film just taking it and making us black and white and making us believe this is the way things are supposed to be. Um, yeah, programs us also to, I guess, make us less compassionate in a way, less
That
understanding.
that for me also it leans into the idea that uh again, film is designed to manipulate our emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the adventure we go on. We come into the show. Uh, the opening scene, is something that is puts us, in awe. Then we see the hero and we fall in love with this character. Then they are challenged by something and we feel fearful for them, and then we have hope that they'll overcome it, and then they fall victim to some other hardship, and then we fear for them, and then we're hoping they'll come out at the end of it, and then when they finally do it, the climax of the film, we are so happy and elated, and then the film ends, on a happy note, a happily ever after, and we're like, we and
And that's
we've
the
ridden these emotions.
destination.
Yes, that's the destination. And so, don't you think that similarly, because we are following that pattern, that algorithm,
Formula. Hmm.
that formula in a sense, that we are trying to duplicate it subconsciously in our own lives as well?
Yes, definitely. We just, yeah. Yeah, yes. That's exactly what we are doing. You know, we are trying to emulate on film or in media. And I would like to say it again, books as well.
Yes.
Books, film, it falls under media. Um, yeah, I agree with you.
The other thing is, in terms of, the happily ever after and the choices that people make, right, to get there. Um, One of the things that film does is that it gives you, if it does show you married life, right, it will show you things that serve as milestones. So, 2 years into the marriage, skip 2 years into the future, there are there's a baby and a toddler, basically. Not 2 years, let's say 4 years into the future, there's a baby and a toddler, all right? That's a standard of success in the marriage, right? There's a house, and there's a car or two cars. That's a standard. And people then feel like failures in their marriages when 4 years later perhaps they haven't been able to have a child, for whatever
Hmm.
reason.
All
Um,
these expectations.
Yes, because of all these expectations, and you know that in society, people are like that also. When a couple gets married, uh, from the first month already, when you're gonna have a baby, when you're gonna have a baby, when you're gonna have a baby, and if it's been 2 years already, you guys should. It's time for you to have children, man.
It's
what are
quite
you waiting for?
inappropriate also to ask
Yes, I mean
when you never
that's
know what
simple.
someone is going through.
Exactly. And then you have a situation. Let's say a couple dads have a child. Then it's like, then the questions change. So when is he going to preschool? When is he going to primary school? And then once he's in primary school, when are you gonna have another child? Do you understand? And
I
and
do
and
understand.
and
I
and and
do.
and, and, and so kind of like, do you think that our expectations, yes, society does place pressure also, that and
Cultural pressure.
cultural things, 100% the cultural pressure, but do you think also it's because we see that as a natural progression in film as well, that even Bella in Twilight, had a baby, a vampire baby, at the end of it. So she achieved a goal that many people want, and that is she had a child. So basically, don't you think that's what we are doing also? Is we're trying to emulate that same sort of uh, pattern in our own lives, and when we can't achieve it, that contributes to people feeling down and depressed as if they are, as if the experience is not valid because they don't have all of these things.
Um, y- Yet again, I think it's different elements. Form plays a role in it, but it's also cultural expectations. That's for sure. But is it cultural expectations also based on form or what, the older generation has watched?
I would say cultural expectations, but also look, a lot of what we see today is informed by film. You know, uh, I would venture to say 70 years ago, no one thought about the girlfriend and boyfriend scenario, right? Until people started watching film. Those early
Mm-hmm.
50s, I think 50s, 40s, 50s, 50s, 60s films where the boy in his Leatherman jacket, in the town, driving his brand new, Studebaker, whatever type of car he's driving, goes to pick up his high school sweetheart, and they drive off to the ice cream parlor and have an ice cream. And I think this idea perhaps was implanted in our psyche that there is this such a thing as a girlfriend and boyfriend scenario, right? And so there was an expectation in society about, when are you going to get into a relationship, even as a primary school or high school teacher and primary school, high school learner, there's this perception that's created. And even till today, you find adults asking children of 3 and 4 years old, "Oh, is that your girlfriend?
Is that your
S-
boyfriend?
Is
Yet
that your
again,
boyfriend?"
inappropriate.
It's extremely inappropriate. But don't you think that again, film created the idea that you must be in a relationship, right? You must be in a relationship, and if you are a child, uh, it's cute to be in a relationship at that age. If you are a teenager, it's part of society says it's part of natural development to be like
Western
that.
society says yes,
Exactly. But but
natural.
but Western society becomes, our third world, perception as well. Eventually, everything filters down here. I mean, OBE came here as well. Eventually,
Mm.
after failing in the West.
Yeah, I think we should be looking at that as well. We should be looking at the fact that we are relying more on Western society's worldview when it comes to, like you were speaking about marriage, relationships. Are we even aware that what we are absorbing, what we are watching is coming from the West? What they are putting out there is, as I don't want to say propaganda, but yeah, what the
Say
West is
propaganda.
putting out,
Say propaganda. I
you
will back you, Tashneem, if you say propaganda. And the reason why I agree, why I say that, is all you've got to do is look at the portrayal of Muslims in the West. Look at the portrayal of African people as a whole in the West, of Asian people as a whole in the West. They're always stereotypes, you know. Very seldom do you get any unique stories that tell. So, if you want to say propaganda, say propaganda. I will support you. That
But even
Western
if they tell
propaganda
our
is the buzzword here.
stories, that is what I'd fear more. When they represent, they try to represent us Muslims, there's always it's always secular Muslims that are being represented. And this is way off from the topic of relationships, but it does relate. We
Hmm.
watch film, we watch movie, we watch the news, mainstream news. There's a war going on right, like at the moment. Um, but there's been wars going on for so long in so many other
Hmm.
different places. So this is also what we have to ask, like how much things are we absorbing on TV
Hmm.
that's affecting us, and when do we take a step back? Because I'm sure there are other people out there, more people out there who
Hmm.
know that this is not realistic. The expectation that film and media places on people is not real, or that idealistic happily ever after, it's not real. Reality is what you make of it. If you want something romantic, you put in the effort, you do things, you don't know, like, what I'm saying is we can't be the only people who are self-aware. That is what I mean.
And
But I
and also
do, yeah,
and also one thing that comes to mind is you spoke about putting in the work. Islam is all about putting in the work. For
yes.
instance, Islam teaches us how we should, as spouses, treat our partners. Preparing ourselves as males or females. When we are going to be in the presence of each other, making sure that we are presentable, as spouses, making sure that we are smiling in each other's company, that we are
More
complimentary.
importantly, treating someone with respect. Everyone deserves respect at the end of the day, and that is
It,
so
it, it,
important.
it,
Kindness,
exactly.
respect.
And mercy, which is part of the instruction. It's part of the, you can say, the book of marriage basically is to say mercy and respect is how you treat your spouse, particularly men to women. So, here's the perfect example of how relationships should work and will work. But we tend to still, because our
Buy
emotions,
into film.
buy into Western ideas of film,
Mm-hmm.
and Western ideas of relationships with the bad boy and bad girl scenario. Uh, we buy into Western films with the idea of, uh, you know, tumultuous relationships. They're always the most exciting ones, you know,
So exciting.
so exciting.
Why would you want something boring or
Of
someone
course,
kind or someone loving if you can have something?
I mean, even
Which
Jack and Rose's relationship ended in disaster
death.
and death for him at
Mm.
least. But but the romance, the romance around this film was so powerful that no one
I fell
considered.
for it as well. I'm sure
Yes.
you need to, because you're speaking about it.
Well, let me come back to my point. My point is that the romance around this is so powerful, right? That it takes people's minds away from all the other things. And one of the things that I found quite, interesting in the film, and I think I mentioned this previously when we spoke, was that there's this class system present on the boat. It's even present in the fact that Rose is aware of her privilege, right? She, up until the point where she abandons Jack when he's accused of, stealing the necklace or whatever the case may be. She abandons him. So hence she's aware of her privilege. And she thinks, well, he's just a street rat, basically. So he probably would have done that. You understand
No,
what I'm
no,
saying?
no. He's not a street rat. Aladdin is a street rat.
Well, okay, he's a drifter. Let's say he's a drifter,
Hmm.
right? Although I like the Aladdin, the original one particularly, which is the Disney ones. This is amazing. Although it's not it's a realistic portrayal of Arabs and Muslims as well. It's just fantasy. But anyway, coming back to that, so no one sees the inequality as much as they see the romance of the story, because it's still the romance element is so powerful to people, but that it's enough for people to blot out the ugly parts of the film, the things that don't make sense, the fact that
But well,
Ro-
that's the way they manipulate us, though.
yes, the way
They. Hmm.
the way that Rose, in essence, allowed Jack to die. She could have sacrificed herself for if she loved him as much as he loved her.
Mm. Hmm.
Or,
But I
or
mean,
maybe they both could have tried to, end up floating on a door. But yeah, that's James Cameron said, well, Jack just had to die. That's what the script says. Basically, Jack dies in the film. But you were saying?
um, oh God, I forgot what I was going to say now.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's come back to and as we wind down, as and we start looking at everything that we've discussed so far. So, firstly, we did say that the whole idea of romance is to a large degree uh, people's yearnings and desires to to see themselves in the role that the role that this fantasy world portrays. They want to see themselves as the heroine. They desire something that is so fantastical that they will give up reality for the fantasy,
Hmm.
which is quite sad. Then we also, we spoke about the fact that when people get into a relationship sometimes, particularly when it's with people who are classified as a bad boy or bad girl, it's because they partially, and we said, yes, there are, as you mentioned, there are there are other societal factors that shape this whole, experience, but
Can
also,
I just add on to that?
yeah,
You were speaking earlier about the bad guy and the good guy. Within film, there's also this nice guy trope that they love speaking about. You know, the nice guy, as in he's so nice, he does this for you, he does that for you, but he's always having expectation with. He's not being nice for the sole purpose of being nice. It's more for selfish reasons. Being nice to gain something. And I'm bringing this up because in reality, um, I was thinking about the GBV that's happening um, within South Africa specifically. When we see the nice guy in film, um, wait, what was I going to say now? We see the nice guy in film. I just lost my train of thought, Fasih.
let's jog your memory. Let's jog your memory.
Oh my god!
So we're speaking about GBV, the idea of the nice guy,
Yes,
and
the
and and
nice
and
guy.
yes,
Let me just think quickly. Shit, I just forgot. Oh yeah, the villain. Oh, then they speak about the villain. Oh, that is why I wanted to relate the two. Okay,
Mm,
so they speak about the villain, right?
mm,
And the villain is someone that looks a certain way, that behaves a certain way.
mm,
However, in reality, it's usually the nice guy that's the one that is doing suspicious things. And by this, I mean, when it comes to GBV, you know, dividing the two now, film from um, reality. Because in
mm.
reality, it's the nice guy who's at the post office, um, you know, opening the door for you to post whatever, and then the nice guy is the one, or the post office guy is the one that's killing you, or the nice guy who is a paraplegic. Is that what Oscar Pistorius is?
Um, y- yeah, I don't know if we could call him a paraplegic, but yeah,
What
maybe
is he?
I think he's a paraplegic. Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Oscar Pistorius, for instance. I don't want to say his name, but yeah. Or him, for instance, he was the nice guy, and yet he shot his girlfriend. What I'm trying to say is that film makes us believe that villains are supposed to look and act a certain way, but in reality, we know that it's not. Villains don't look like that. It's usually the nice guys, or the guys who you think are nice, you know, who are the monsters, who are the villains. So we have to also learn to differentiate between that too as well. Villains aren't always what they look like in reality. That's another thing I think we should have touched on. The fact that because we are speaking of film and media, does it relate to relationships?
Let's open up that discussion. So you're saying that in film, we also we look at the happily ever after, and particularly with animated films, the sense of uh, particularly in films when it comes to you know uh, love at first sight. You see the person, you want to marry them, and you want to spend the rest of your life with them. All right. So film tells you if they're beautiful, they're perfect. All right. But the reality is
Or if they're
sometimes,
exciting.
or they're exciting, then they're perfect. But sometimes it's more than that, right? Sometimes the person could actually be the toxic person. They could be the abusive person. They could be the one with emotional scars and challenges. They could be the one who's uh, violent
Mm,
and conniving and narcissistic. But because of our programming and the way that we perceive what a a ideal spouse would be, that we don't see these warning signs and we don't look hard enough at the person and investigate the person hard enough, and then we find something completely different. And I think that that's sometimes also because film and television don't give you any tools. They just
they
point you in a
don't.
direction of a fantasy, and you just follow along with your heart.
You just follow along with your art. Yes, yes. These specific tropes that they offer us, and yet again, this is why I keep speaking about characters being one-dimensional. People are not one-dimensional. I don't know how much I can highlight this, that we are all complex human beings. You were just speaking now about someone being toxic. I don't even like calling people toxic because that's not the full description. There's more to someone than you know toxic, I guess, like someone being toxic. There are other underlying layers as well. But within this context, yes, yes, within this context, definitely. We fall for the tropes. We think the tropes film offers us is what's going to happen in reality. And by this is, yeah, this is what I mean when I speak about the nice guy trope, and about the villain. We think villains are people walking around here with a mustache, twirling the mustache, or with scars in their face, whereas it's just someone normal that's standing in a post office, like I
Can I can,
said.
can I just tell you that that trope is from the 1930s? I don't see any people twirling their mustaches today.
Well, they should
Um,
bring it back. It
and
was really
and
cool.
tying young maidens to train tracks. You know, where the steam engine is passing.
And
That
laughing like, ha
yeah.
ha.
But of course, because you cannot hear the laughter, having a little silent movie, title card appear there
Hmm.
with the dialogue. That was a weird. That was a weird, era, but it's fun. But fun, I suppose. I I, I speak.
I wouldn't know. I wasn't born in the 1930s.
Are you saying I was? But anyway, coming back to that, I'm glad that you spoke about GBV because it's part of the journey. In discussing these things, that our perceptions don't leave room for logical and intensive thought and consideration of things. Emotions just have a way of sweeping us away, into
Hmm.
fantasy land. And
But this is why I was speaking to you. I don't know if I said it the last time, but I mean, we should try and take our emotions and we should try to take our rational mind and we should try to put the two together to create something that's a little bit wiser within our decisions, you know?
Mhm.
And especially when it comes to finding a partner or finding a spouse, I think it's very important, or I don't know, personally for me, is to set aside your feelings and find out, don't find out the potential of someone, rather see who is this person, what is their character like, or like what's their personality like, what's their history. You need to find out all these things. You need to be curious. You need to know basically. Feelings can always come afterwards, guys.
And I
But
think also,
character loss, whatever.
yeah, I think also, observing people with a critical eye, as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
in
No,
their
I
home
think I
environment.
think with the discerning eye. Sorry, this is a bad habit of mine.
But let's use the word critical.
Mm-hmm.
Discerning, yes, but let's use the word critical. Observing the person with a critical eye, looking at, because obviously, I mean, the idea and potential is that this person might be your life partner. All right, you might end up living as husband and wife, alone in a room in a house, with a person whom you fear might be, or you fear might not be genuine, or you fear might not be the person that you think they are. So therefore, you want to eliminate that as much as possible. I'm not saying that you can eliminate it entirely, but one can at least try and make informed choices. And I think sometimes there are many people who talk about the signs, the worst signs that they ignored sometimes.
Red flags.
Red flags, like
Yeah.
someone just flaring up and getting angry over nothing, or the day he shoved her, right? Or the day that um he got home, and or even she got home, because I mean we're talking about gender-based violence, but I mean if you speak about it from both genders,
Mm-hmm.
uh the fact that she got home and she got physical almost with a father, or physical with a brother, and you're standing there and you're like, whoa, man, this this doesn't look right, you know similarly, he comes home and he has an argument with his mother, or another member of his family, and he overreacts to the point where he becomes physical, all right, or he acts in a way that is completely out of character, and that's a red flag. That's something that tells you that this person is, you know they are
We
they
shouldn't
have the
also
potential.
mistake red flags for, moments. I think we shouldn't also judge people based on moments,
But
and
how
we
do you
should
but
know
how
the
do you
difference between the two.
but how do you know the difference
Someone
between?
physically harming someone else, that's definitely a red flag. Like, that's not even a moment, that's a like big red flag. I mean, wouldn't want anyone lifting your hand up to anyone or being violent, definitely. But I mean,
But
when it
how
comes to moments,
but how do you
you
know
know,
the difference between a red flag and a moment?
oh, well, I don't know. We just think. I find that with red flags, it's something that's constant. But with moments, if someone is, you just meet someone and you're speaking and the person is, acting a bit weird, that's a moment. Okay, maybe that person's just not comfortable yet. But once you get to know the person and there are signs of them being violent, that's a red flag. I think that's the difference between the two. And I think film yet
But but
again tells
but
us that we can change these people by just giving them love and just, offering them, empathy or, consideration or compassion. But sometimes people need to also just work on themselves. We can't be the fixers. That's the other thing we should also learn at the end of the day. We can't fix people. People need to fix themselves. And the messages that film and media gives us is the complete opposite. You can change that man. You can, think about Beauty and the Beast on Disney as well.
for me, that particular story, right, is all about abuse and control,
And
and
Stockholm
making
Syndrome.
and Stockholm syndrome and making that appealing and aromantic, right? The beast literally kidnapped her, kept her there. She fell in love with him. Stockholm syndrome, hashtag Stockholm
Hmm.
syndrome. And then, kind of like through being imprisoned and being, emotionally manipulated into having into caring about the beast. This kind of pushes the story forward. And don't you think also that sometimes our our ideas of romance are a little bit sick? Because the whole world thinks that Beauty and the Beast is romantic because he ends up being a handsome prince, and that changes everything, right?
Well, it's like the frog that was kissed.
Yes, I mean, like he
The
kisses a
princess and
frog.
the frog. Hmm.
Yes, she kisses a frog. He turns into a prince, and that's like that's it's this obsession with beauty in our society, where beauty will make things right. Beauty and the Beast. When he becomes beautiful, or he becomes handsome, uh, all of a sudden, all of his issues are gone. You understand what I'm saying?
It just
Uh,
disappears.
it just disappeared. Yeah. It's all of these weird things, and I think, uh, oh, leave
But
certain
how
little
much of that
traces.
have we normalized also? How much of that has our culture also normalized, just so by the way, because of TV and film and media. I mean, we've normalized all these things as well. You know, you find certain people who are in abusive relationships staying in the abusive relationship. Why? Because for them it's normal. They've seen this growing up. Why? It could be yet again because what I'm saying is film and media isn't something that's just happened now. It's happened way before. And
Yes.
maybe generations before this has taken, they've seen TV and they've seen what happens in film and then they think this is normal.
It's
Having
all.
a being in a disrespectful relationship or an
Yes.
unhealthy relationship where conflict isn't handled well is just normal. Someone love bombing you is just normal. Oh, he's so romantic. He's just expressing himself in the way he feels about me. We're normalizing things that are supposed to be, I mean, clear signs that something might not work out.
One of the things that I find in film is quite bizarre is this idea of stalking the partner when they no longer want to be in your presence, right? Uh, and playing a radio outside of their home, or and following them everywhere, and just trying to get to talk to them, and kind of like being in their face all the time, and not. I mean, personally, I feel that if people don't want you to be in this space, then that's a sign, right? Like that's a sign that, well, maybe I shouldn't be in this space. Maybe I should, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, maybe this is not the right fit. But it's almost as if film is trying to say stalk, and chase this person and make them feel uncomfortable until they take you back. And again, it leads into the idea that it's this, for lack of a better word, Western propaganda that, uh, women like to be stalked and women
We
like to
don't.
be. Yeah, yes, it's
So, by the way,
yes, of course, but it's this idea that form was created that women like to be stalked, and women like to be pressurized into things that they don't like, and so
and women like to be
hey,
controlled.
and yes, and women like to be controlled as well. So it's all of
Mm-hmm.
these things that ultimately that these love stories portray, and people are absorbing it, and so when people get into abusive relationships and they have controlling spouses, to some degree they give into it because on a subconscious level they think that's how it should be. That's what love is, isn't it? You know.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, like I was saying, we normalize so many things. Um, we normalize things, but why do we also normalize it? Is it because of solely TV, film, media, or is it because of our culture as well? That's why I keep saying there are different elements, but TV is definitely the primary.
Yes.
It's definitely the primary culprit, I
Culp-
guess.
Culprits. Now, when we start looking at solutions, right? Uh, is the solution just to switch the TV off? Is the solution just to stop watching film? What are the solutions to help us, transform our thinking around relationships, around marriage, around what is beyond the happily ever after, right? How do we change, and how do we move beyond that? Um, what steps do we need to take? I mean, we've been programmed for years. I mean, you and I come from an era where we had VCRs, and there was cinema already, and there was our version of cable TV at the time, and then it moved it morphed into what we have now: streaming services. Any topic, any genre of film you want to watch, boom, click it, there it is. Any
Mm-hmm.
and nowadays there are certain popular themes that are being marketed to us, film themes that are being marketed to us on a regular basis. So how do we change that narrative, and how do we take back our power and our thinking ability and discernment from these elements of, for lack of a better word, Western propaganda.
Um, and I can't speak on behalf of everyone else, but I mean, we can only speak on, like, personally what we've done, what we think helped us, I guess, step out of the matrix. I posed this question to other people as well about, do they think that home and media made them choose a partner, yes or no? And some of them, most of them actually, they see that film, Disney, I believe after this played a big role in them before it played a big role in them choosing someone or dating someone until they found out that it was not the reality, or the person was not the reality, or the situation wasn't the reality of what the expectation was by watching this film and media. So I think at times it's based on experience also. Someone has to experience things, so people have to experience things to actually learn, knock your head a couple of times. I always say, if you repeat the same mistake, you're in a time loop, and you're the only one that can step out of that time loop once you actually change the pattern or do something differently. We can't tell people to stop watching TV, but we can advise them to become more self aware, you know, to become more self reflective, to see things for what they really are and not for the potential. I think
Can
this is
can
also
can
very
I add something
important.
to that? I'd like to add
Yes,
something to that,
definitely.
because you've mentioned something about what has given us the ability to look beyond the matrix a little bit. I'm not saying that we we have some magical ability. But I think a lot because we are so cynical about film, or at least maybe I am cynical about film, uh, and we question these concepts, and we've taken the time to really understand what the elements that go into making a film. It give Once you start to see how the sausage is made, once you look behind the curtain, basically, and you realize all of these components that go together, and these themes. It's easier for you now to when you're watching a film, see the actor and the actress, and see the makeup artist and the boom operator and the quality of the sound and the location, and it becomes more of an idea in your mind that this is a production rather than it being real. Would you say that's probably helped you kind of not get swept in by the emotion as much?
Um, I don't know. I really don't know. I have to think about that. Oh, I don't know. I don't think it's that though. The production, or even if I know something, there's a production behind it. Before, I would still fall for these silly stereotypes or tropes. I mean,
And
yeah.
and I guess also we spoke about inner work, working on yourself and being real
Mm-hmm.
with yourself and living in the reality. Would you say that unplugging sometimes is important also for us to be
Oh
able to
yes,
understand
definitely.
our minds and our personalities independently from what we see on screen? Because sometimes, I mean, literally, we become like drones. You end your work day where you literally 9 to 5 are playing a role, some role. You come home maybe, and then you become absorbed into a fantasy world. So you never get to be yourself really,
Mm-hmm.
because you're exchanging one reality for another.
But we're speaking about us, and you were saying earlier about we, or we becoming the hero of the story, but we forget also that sometimes, especially when it comes to relationships, we assign these labels or these stereotypes or these tropes onto someone else as well. And I think that is also very important to consider when we're speaking about relationships and we're speaking about film and media. Because we were speaking about falling in love with the potential of someone, but the reason why there's this potential or this idea is because we are assigning them a character, or we are assigning them a label or trope that we found on television, based on the characteristics. If
Because
that makes sense.
when people talk about Prince Charming, they're talking about a character in an animated film.
Mm-hmm.
Prince Charming is not a real person. He's a trope. He's a stereotype, right? He's someone who judges women by the size of their feet, basically. Um, so it's not
Mm-hmm.
a it's is Prince Charming Cinderella, was he Sleeping Beauty? I
I
got
can't
confused there.
remember. I think it's Sleeping Beauty though.
Okay, then he kisses a dead woman against their will, but nonetheless, that is who he is. He's not real, and so it's sad that we as a society, when people are looking for the Prince Charming, they're looking for someone that doesn't exist. That doesn't
Mm.
have any kind of uh, currency in the
Personality.
real
He has no
in the real world.
personality, by the way.
Exactly, he's just supposed to be charming, but he's got no personality. Right? The whole thing in the story is for him to be a handsome prince and kiss Sleeping
That's
Beauty.
his role. That's the character. That's what they assign. That's the label.
The strange woman. The strange woman he
Mm.
finds in the forest. He sees her to be so beautiful, and he decides to kiss her, and she's dead. As far as he knows. So I mean, this is a weird story if you think about it. This is really
If you say it
not a
out
lot of.
loud, definitely.
Yes, I mean, let's take the role of Cinderella for instance. Like we said again, traveling around town looking for a woman based on a shoe size, right? a woman you met once, whom you now are convinced is your forever wife, type of thing. Right? Uh,
It
the
depends on what story, because there's a lot of retelling of Cinderella also.
Of course, no, there's been many rewrites of
Mm-hmm.
the story, and uh, nowadays these women are action stars and these men are action stars. Uh, we know the whole Snow White story, had a little bit of a overhaul some time ago as well. But nonetheless, with all of these things, having said all of that, would you say that another thing that needs to be looked at is not so much the film, but what we as adults tell children about life, and that should take center stage, that they should take from us what we explain married life to be in its reality, rather than having them just sit in front of TV and grow up with these ideas and these ideals that becomes reinforced later on by virtue of a society that's also been swept up by the same tropes, basically.
The same
Where do we fit
ideas.
in? Yeah, where do we fit in as our generation, and our generation who are parents in a sense?
Oh, well, with everything you can break the cycle as well. You know, everything in moderation. Teaching children that that's not real. I mean, our generation specifically, we were the ones who were just placed in front of television. Now we have parents who are aware of the ramifications of, a child being in front of any form of a screen. So they have specific TV times, they have times, they have, like I said, everything in moderation. Um, and I think that's our responsibility at the end of the day, to inform children this is not real. What you're seeing is not real. This is, there are people behind the screen, they're recording, you know, um, that's just using your imagination basically.
Yeah,
That's it.
and you can't really choose a woman by shoe size,
Maybe you can.
because I mean, how many size sevens are there in the kingdom? How many size fives are there in the kingdom? I mean, that shoe would have fit perfectly on a number of different women. That doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. It's the logic is flawed. Um, he shouldn't have met Cinderella. I mean, is she like the only size five in the whole kingdom? Come on, man. But anyway, uh, the other thing that I wanted to touch on, and as we wind down, is, so we've said that parents play a role, and adults play a role in shaping the minds of children by virtue of talking to them, and expressing how what they're seeing is not real, and this is not a real depiction of real life. The other thing
Mm-hmm.
also is, um how do we as adults uh deprogram ourselves, because again we are consuming content that's been made available to us. But how do we begin to deprogram ourselves? What skills do we need to develop to be able to start to shift the dynamic? Because again, certainly we've fallen into certain habits, and there must be a way to break those habits, at least in the way that we think.
I think we should stop conflating entertainment with something that's real, because that's what TV and film is there for. It's there for entertainment. That's it, you know. And even with us, it's supposed to be moderation. Every single thing is there for yeah, for enjoyment and for moderation. Like you should watch it in moderation. I'm not saying stop watching TV, or, I can't actually dictate what anyone should do. But I mean, I think we should be realistic
Mm,
about certain things. TV, movies, soapies, books, all of this is there for enjoyment, and that is it. Um, but living our lives, and doing things, and I mean, experiencing certain things, and, seeing things for what they are, seeing it and not just looking at it, or not hearing things and actually listening to it is better than, I think, living an idea or an idealistic view of this of this of this happily ever after. Yeah.
Tashneem, wise words, and I think you've given us a lot to think about this evening as we've and I navigated quite an interesting topic because it's something that exists in our society, but something that we hardly ever analyze. We take it for granted. We live this life of expectations that have been built upon film and television and other forms of media and books, and we go out in the world and go and look for what we've seen, what we've read about, what we've seen on TV, what we've heard about basically we go and look for the fantasy, and sometimes that can be destructive. In many cases, it is. So I want to say Shukran for for helping me unpack this, and I look forward to the comments that are going to come in. And once again, I ask you, the listener, if you're someone who, if you have an opinion on this, do you feel that you've been, your perceptions have been shaped? And how have you also broken the cycle as a person who's also perhaps grown up with film and television, and how have you deprogrammed yourself? Have you made better choices and different choices? Let us know. Send us a WhatsApp 0829 913 913. Tashneem, shukran so much for joining me. And yeah, have a fantastic evening further.
Shukran for having me, Muhammad Fasih, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And from myself, Muhammad Fasih Peterson, it's been a pleasure being in your company. I bid you assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And have a fantastic Friday further. Right. Let me just stop this.
I feel like a lot of people are going to be offended by what we are saying.
What did I say?
No, like,